A true and faithful relation would pass for many years between Dr. John Dee and some spirits, 1659, Meric Casaubon's book, Libri Mystici Apertorii, Cracoviensis, Sabbatici, Anno 1584. Saturday, Cracovia, 7 Mai, Main Hora 6. After prayers appeared Gabriel and Avagi with the table, and Gabriel with his dart in his hand. Moreover, there appeared, like furniture, of table with a white cloth, a candlestick, and taper on it, with a desk and cushions, which I had caused to be made, with red crosses on them, also Edward Kelly himself, and I appeared in the same stone. In effect, all things as we had before us. After a quarter of an hour, that shew of our furniture and ourselves disappeared. Edward Kelly said that Gabriel standeth up and speaketh as follows. A mighty city was built on the top of a mountain, in the which dwelt many thousands. Round about the hill ran a fresh river, which was the only comfort of the town, for of it they drank, their wives, their children, their manservants, their maidservants, their camels, horses, mules, and all the beasts of their fields, the beginning of which river was a spring, which was unknown to the city by reason of the Yeth, something missing from that, from whence it descended. Came to pass that a serpent groaned for her time, and lo, she brought forth, and were such as herself. And she lifted up her head, and leaned upon her twice riven tail, and beheld the sun steadfastly. For her envy was toward that city. And she said within herself, My children are yet young. The time grew, and they became big. And she went unto the spring, and smiled, and said, with a laughing voice, The earth is fallen into thee, thou art choked. But hearken unto my voice, thou shalt receive comfort. But she would not, and she lifted up her voice and roared, for she was full of craft and deceit. And she said unto the shingles, through the which the spring runs, or rather saith, Thou art full of emptiness and void places. Let my children, therefore, hide themselves within thee for a season. And they were contented. And she departed willingly, and saith within herself, Now I know I shall be lady of the city. And after a few years the young serpents became great, so that the one half of their bodies dwelt within the shingles, the rest troubled the passage of the spring, so that the spring groaned, for the injury that was done against her was great, a great misery, for the hill is become desolate, without the water, and the city, and the beasts perish for want of drink. For the people groan, and are full of sorrow. This city and serpents are 60 now, and judgment must be had betwixt the shingles and the spring, for between life and death of the city. Thus saith the Lord unto thee, pointing to Edward Kelly, Gird up thyself, and sit down, consider both parts, and give judgment, for thy mouth shall this day be the judgment of the Lord. Now, pointing to Edward Kelly is not part of the speech, just the entity pointed in the middle of that. Edward Kelly said, "Do you mean me?" And dots, so I don't know how much time goes on between one saying and the other, but Edward Kelly said, "As the Lord hath put the authority of judgment into thy hand, so I beseech him to give me wisdom and understanding to judge right, and because the judgment hereof is committed to me, I suspect some other mystery to lie hidden in this my judgment required, but if it shall please God that my friend here, Master D, shall give me his advice, I shall think myself well satisfied. Consider with your..." and then presumably Gabriel again, "Consider with yourself, saith the Lord, and give judgment against the shingles. For the fault is plain. Consider 2 points: the necessity of the spring, that it must come that ways, and secondly, the health of the city." Edward Kelly said, "My judgment is that the shingles and serpent should be removed away by an earthquake from that place which they encumber, and let that there be a fit new place and course for that spring to the relief of that city as it was before." And Gabriel said, "Be it so, as thou hast said, for it is a just judgment. Now hearken what the Lord saith: the people and the city of the hill is the world which, from time to time, by the mercy and spring of God's wisdom, relieved, quenched, according to the extremity and necessity of their thirsting. But the people and city are such as are of the temple and church of God, which drink of his mercy to their comfort. The camels and other beasts are the people of the earth, which delight in sin and their own imagination, which also are relieved with those that are of the city. But the diversities of their bodies doth cause the diversity of the ends of their comfort. The hill wherein the spring is signifieth his prophets, and such as are drunken in the Lord, through whom cowardly the mercies and will of God and of the highest are opened from time to time, according to the secret will and determination of such as are within the city of his elect. But the frailties and affections of their flesh and outward man are the fond imaginations and loose shingles, wherein the serpent, the old devil, hath harbound her children, the spirits of darkness and deceit, which always resist the will of God, and are put between the mercies of God and his people. Moses, Daniel, Esdras, all the rest of the prophets, Christ is 12, Paul, the messenger of God, they did all hurt the congregation of the faithful in their flesh, until they gave sentence against themselves, as thou hast done, with amendment of life. For who is worthy to know the secrets of God, but he that delighteth in righteousness, in obedience, full of faith, and the spirit of understanding? Be it therefore unto thee, as thou hast said, let the shingles and serpents be separated, that the fountain may feed as before. All the trash that thou hast of the wicked, burn it." And 2 things about all this is, one, it's apparent this is bouncing off the Christian doctrines that started with Paul, that we're all sinners and that sort of stuff. And one of the things with the Jewish writings is we find as time goes on, the prophets sound like worse individuals. Yes, they all made mistakes, but they were perfecting individuals. And it wasn't that they had to make mistakes to whatever in order to repent hard enough to become the right individual. Although that you do see some of that going on. But in other ways, you could say they were innocent. And I don't know if this is bouncing off some, or if this is a version of some European myth, whether it's Persian, Iranian, whatever word you want to use for that race, myth, whether it's a Hindu myth, the race, there's not really a Hindu religion, but particularly on the Persian side, the Persian Iranian Aryavatra was what it used to be called. They thought there was a city of serpents, you could say. So from the Hindu myths, there was like whole communities, and that's where some of this comes from. Later, when some of this was rendered into Old Persian, and Ahriman was, and Pahlavi and all that, Ahriman was still thought of as leading the snakes. Edward Kelly said, Edward Kelly says, I do not know. They are wicked. And Gabriel said, their doings with thee are the hindrance of the will of God, and therefore they are wicked. Thou hast given judgment against thyself. Take heed thou offend not thy own soul. D said, send down thy spirit, O Lord, and illuminate Edward Kelly, his heart, with perceiving of his wrong opinion, and so on. Edward Kelly said, if Moses and Daniel were skillful in the arts of the Egyptian magicians, and were not thereby hindered for being the servants of God, why may not I deal with these without hindrance to the will of God? Well, it depends on what you mean by magicians. Ancient Egyptians had the scene and the scene and the thod sort of sound, and the so sihr and sahar. So if that's what you mean by magic, no. In Arabic, you just have the scene version, but because that's involving the evil spirits. You're calling them up and making them whatever, but invoking, evoking, whatever. It's, and don't pull this garbage with me that I don't worship them, they're like my buddies. It's like, well, no, you can perform rituals and be a spiritual person, and beings will sometimes admit you into their company or just be present when you're doing your thing. But it's different when you're like, well, I'm leaving this offering for them, and I'm, asking its permission to be in an area and that sort of thing. And, because people do rituals where they show up into an area and seek refuge with the jinn of the area, whatever word you're going to use for jinn, or they ask permission. Oh, I can't use this as a place of worship unless I ask the beings of the cave. I've witnessed that of others. And people do their own thing. I don't have to, but anyways. So Gabriel continuing, darkness yieldeth unto light. The greater excludeth the lesser. The more a man knoweth wickedness, the more he shall hate it, being called back. The more they knew the shadow, so much more they delighted in the body. For the doings of the Egyptians seem, and are not so. The doings of the Lord are and continue, for as the painter imitateth the gestures of man in his faculty, so doth the devil the substance and things created and made by God. Stand up and look into the whole world, into her youth and middle age, for they are past. Where are the monuments that Satan hath builded? This very well could be true. We look at, in high school they said, no, somewhere between 1 and 2 million years, and then in college they found out, or at least the information became known, that humanity had been around for about 7 million years. And then they made that find up in the Hindu Kush Himalayas of this culture, and it looked even like they had writing and worked metal and stuff, and they were around about 11 something million years ago. So who knows how far humanity goes back, but we have in one way or another been told through that we're in the latter days, the last couple prophets of God, you could say. The most recent Messiah, that was all the message, all part of that message. Edward Kelly said, "Hath Satan builded any monuments?" And the entity called Gabriel said, well, a lot of people have like similar names. It's like, oh, Michael. It's like, well, it's not necessarily the Michael you're thinking of, right? But Gabriel said, hath he not builded him a fort upon the whole earth? Hath he not the victory over the saints? Dwelleth he not in the temple of the highest? Triumph he not in the cities of the whole world? Yes, but without comfort are his victories, without pleasure his dwelling places. For he knoweth his time is at hand. He that now giveth freedom shall become bound, and unto whom the whole world is as a garden, shall there be no 1 foot left. Therefore are all his pleasures vanity, all his triumphs smoke, and his authority nothing indeed, but a mere shadow. For that is not, cannot be, where it is said of the Lord, it shall not be. Neither can truth, light, or wisdom ascend from the earth, but descend from the heavens. Compare the earth into which the devil is thrust, as into his dwelling, with the heavens which are provided for the holy. Consider the pain of the one and the pleasure of the other, the seat of God's justice and fountain of his mercy, the cave of darkness and the diadem of light. Then cry, woe, 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 unto such as err, and whose lives are but shadows, for their felicity is such as from whence it came, and the reward is all one with the spirit and prince of darkness. And I don't think I can finish this next paragraph, so I'm going to leave it there.